Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home on the brave on the beautiful December the 5th, 2019. Grando Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, the past couple of nights I've had to go pull out some old VHS tapes because there's been no football on television, so I had to watch reruns.
Yeah, you got to watch reruns. There used to be a show called Rerun back in the day, a cartoon. I think it was, it was a cartoon or a TV satire. I remember seeing it when I was a young boy. It's all fair and love and war. We hope we can get Big C some more football to watch. Big C Sports is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also, I want to just tell you that Big C Sports is powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our national sponsors on podcast and TV shows. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, launching on Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. I know tonight, Big C, everybody's hyped about the game in Chicago, but I also want to take just a moment to just say, a lot of times we forget about people who are going through challenges for the holidays, but we do have a national suicide hotline number. We love to give it out as 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, it's very important, Charlton, because we must learn to never forget those who have served this country so admirably. And those are our men and women in our armed forces, Charlton, who have taken the time to go across the world and protect the sovereignty of the United States. But when they come back home, Charlton, often their sovereignty is not protected by our government.
Yeah.
And they're left out. We see so many homeless veterans, Charlton, veterans that are committing suicide at a rate of 20 a day in this country. And this is a horrific disease that we have to find a way to stop. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, is one of those entities that is hoping to intervene and cut down on the suicide rate amongst veterans and everyday people in America.
Yeah,
we need to take the time out during this time of the year as we sit around and celebrate and think about the holidays and spending time with loved ones and family. Think about those veterans who have allowed us to be able to have that sovereignty, to be able to do that, Charlton, to be able to sit in our homes relaxed and comfortable and not worry about somebody destroying our neighborhood like it has been across the world, Charlton, where they've had to go and defend. So we need to defend the mind, the health, and welfare of these great veterans who've returned back to America. The Suicide Prevention Hotline number is one of those ways to stem that, Charlton, but we also got to be more kind and considerate of those veterans that are on the street.
Very well said. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. And I know a lot of times people don't want to hear it. They say, look, we already talked about that. Let's get on to who won the game. But I just want to make sure that people know we have a heart for people. And if you love me, feed my sheep. That's what Jesus told everybody. I also want to wag my tail, Big C. I want to wag our tail, Big C Sports, and received information from iHeartRadio Podcast, one of the top podcasts out of the 250,000 podcasts that they have. We're in the top 1%, very high up on that ladder. So really appreciate that. I want to just bring up this thought of football, and we'll get more into it for NFL football on Big C's, football predictions for Friday. But I know tonight's a really big game, and it's a big game for the Bears, and it's also a big game for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know who is bigger for, but it does feel like it's bigger for the Cowboys because they are in first place. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is desperation time for both teams. When you think about the Bears and the Cowboys last year, Charlton, Both of these teams won their division. The Bears in a convincing 12-4 record, and they're 6-6 on the season at this point. They won't be able to equal the total wins that they had last year, but they're not even probably going to make the playoffs when you look at the two teams in their division that are ahead of them, the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers, which they still have to face both of those teams.
Yep.
The Dallas Cowboys, on the other hand, they're in a dogfight with the Philadelphia Eagles. They're also 6-6 on the season, and they've struggled their last two games, Charlton. Their offense hasn't clicked. Their defense has been giving up a copious amount of points. And so the Cowboys, I would say, first and foremost, are the more desperate team tonight.
Really? I think that's amazing. And I agree, because they are in first place. The Bears really have nothing to lose. They're not going to overtake the Green Bay Packers. I mean, there's a chance that they could somehow sneak into a wild card, but I just think it's over for them. But everybody's playing for the job. Tonight's game, obviously underway. It started at 8:20 kickoff East Coast time on Fox Sports and also the NFL Network. Now, the Cowboys are favored by 2.5, and this is a team that's taken on the chin the last couple of games on the road at New England. The tripping rule was that the phantom tripping calls happened twice against the Cowboys' offensive line. So I say the NFL and the Patriots won that game. And then against Buffalo, it was a turnover factor. Sometimes you've always said, at least for baseball, teams play better when they're on the road, Big C. Cowboys got to play better. They're on the road at Chicago, and it's not about Dak Prescott. It's more about, can they run the football against the Bears defense, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, even more so when you talk about running the ball, Charlton, is can they stop the Bears? That's the thing. I mean, when I look at Mitch Trubisky last week, had his best game of the season, 338 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He seemed to have found his mojo once he was threatened, through the media and the rest of the team that you got to play or you got to move, one of the two. So all of a sudden he's gotten relaxed, he's settled in, and he's playing football the way a second overall draft pick should.
Yeah.
Dallas Cowboys, when you look at Dak Prescott, he's put up the numbers this year.
Yeah.
Put a couple of turnovers in the game, throwing interceptions, Charlton, which are not going to help your offense. But the defense of the Dallas Cowboys has constantly worried me. They got a lot of high-priced players over there. They've been without Van Der Esch, their top middle linebacker, Charlton, and you can see the struggles defensively without him. Sean Lee is a shell of himself filling in for Van Der Esch, but the cornerbacks are going to have a big night tonight, because if they allow Trubisky to have another 300-yard game, Charlton, Dallas is going to have 3 consecutive losses.
Well, you can't afford that. And when you think about the Cowboys, Ezekiel Elliott, the last time he topped 100 yards, it was November 4th. It was about 31 days ago. And I know Jerry did not invest a lot of money in the offensive line for that. And I know that he's already come out and said that his head coach is going to be his head coach in the 2020. And you can say what you want to say. But if you look at the Bears, and they have a running game in David Montgomery, if they run the ball well against Dallas, the way other teams have been able to do, then that opens up more passing lanes for Trubisky. But I want to just get your thoughts, and we don't know the answer to this. If you always feel like your boss is breathing down your neck, it doesn't make you play better. Sometimes it makes you play nervous. It makes you play tight. It makes you play like, man, I have nothing left here anyway, so why give it my all? And I just wonder if that's affecting some people. The Carolina Panthers came out and got rid of Ron Rivera. But he wasn't in first place, but he still felt that he had job security. He said it the day before he was fired. Well, Garrett's not the same. But I just want to know, do you think that gets into the player's mind? If you think you're going to lose your job, it's not that it motivates you. Sometimes you just pass out your resume, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, in football and all professional sports, it's totally different, Charlton. You're playing for your livelihood, regardless of who the head coach is. Your job is to be productive on the field, not worried about what's going on in the media or the head coach or even the owner's mind, Charlton.
Yeah.
You have a task every game, every day in practice. You know what your position is. You know what you need to accomplish in a game. You speak about Ezekiel Elliott. He's a running back.
Yeah.
His job is to run the football, to find the openings, to run to daylight. If he's not getting the job done, Charlton, that's not on the head coach Garrett.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Ezekiel Elliott,
yeah,
who's hit who's hit the wall and just can't get over it right now, Charlton. So it's about him not being as productive. It's not about the play calling. They're still calling the same plays.
Yep.
Is he hitting the hole the same way he did a month and a half ago?
That's a very good question. And when you think about the over-under, it's 43.5. So they're anticipating a low-scoring game. But I look at Dallas's last two outputs, and they got to get more points on the board, especially if they're going to win on the road. I want to just cover a few things as far as NFL stat-wise leaders in the AFC. And when you look at the performance of quarterbacks, oftentimes there's a great correlation with the running backs behind them and the offensive line. Tannehill, Tennessee, he has 1,602 yards and 12 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. When you look at Lamar Jackson for Baltimore, out of 322 attempts, he's completed 214 for 2,532 yards. He has 25 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. Now, people would perceive that Tannehill's a better passer. They would assume that, Big C. But Jackson has more yards and also more attempts, so that may add up too. But fewer interceptions with almost double the passes, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you got to look at the limited amount of games that Ryan Tannehill has played in Tennessee. He didn't start the season. He only took over about 5 weeks ago as the starting quarterback in Tennessee. So when you look at his productivity of him as well as that Tennessee offense, I mean, it's equal to Lamar Jackson as far as what he's done. Lamar Jackson, you're looking at his total body of work for the entire season. Ryan Tannehill, you only have a sample size. He's playing like a former number 1 draft pick since he moved from Miami and came to Tennessee, and they benched Marcus Mariota because of him. This offense has responded in Tennessee more than they were to Mariota.
They are responding. Patrick Mahomes, you think about him, he's attempted 352 passes, completed 227, 2,983 yards, 20 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And they have a big game coming up against New England, and I can't wait until I hear Big C's thoughts on that. But do you like where he is? Almost 3,000 yards passing, and we still have, coming up on week 13.
Well, this is a quarterback who missed 2.5 games, and he's leading the league, and almost, not leading the league, but he's almost at 3,000-yard clip. If he had not missed those 2.5 games, who knows what his numbers would be? They'd most likely be in the stratosphere. I'd put him up at around 3,800 yards if he had not missed those games, Charlton. But he missed those games. Kansas City stayed in the playoff hunt, and now he's back. He had a bad game last week. Will he pick it up this week? And he's going to desperately need one in New England.
Oh, he's going to. And make sure you don't trip anybody if you're the offensive line for Kansas City. They seem to be calling that lately in New England. And then you look at Watson out of Houston, Big C. He has 386 attempts, 267 completions, 3,133 yards, 23 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I think he wished he could just get rid of that last game that they played against the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, they turned it around the following week and beating up on New England. But give me your feeling on Watson. Is he still ahead of the curve in your thoughts?
Well, he has to be a little more consistent. I've seen some lows in his game throughout the season, Charlton. He's a tremendous athlete, tremendous ball velocity and game recognition. He just needs a little more consistency.
He does need that. Now, another player that I love his character, and Derek Carr for the Oakland Raiders, 367 attempts, 259 completions, 2,843 yards. He has 16 touchdowns, but he has 8 interceptions for the Oakland Raiders. And this is a team, in their last couple of football games, they haven't even scored 10 points. I think they scored 3 in New York, and I believe they scored 9 in the last week in their beatdown at Kansas City. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they scored 2 offensive touchdowns in their last 3 games, Charlton. That's just not getting it done. Derek Carr is playing like a scared quarterback who knows he may not be in Las Vegas next year.
Yeah, he might be in Las Vegas, Big C, but it might not be with the Raiders. But I'm sure a lot of people will go to Las Vegas anyway. And then Jacoby Brissett, I know he had the injury on his knee. He's come back, and I hope he can stay healthy throughout the year. I know when guys get a knee injury, they get a little bit skittish in the pocket, knee brace included. But when you look at what he's done, 325 attempts, 209 completions, 2,245 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Do you think the knee injury slowed him down, or is it nothing he thinks about at all, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I think the knee injury slowed him and hampered him just a little bit. But also, the loss of his top tailback, Marlon Mack, really hurt him also because it took a lot of the running game away from the Indianapolis Colts. The offensive line hasn't been as solid this year as they were last year.
Yeah, it makes a difference psychologically, just feeling that you're not going to get hit again. And then Gardner Minshew, Jacksonville Jaguars, 334, attempts, 204 completions, 2,432 yards, 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. You know, the mustache aside, and coming out of Mike Leach's program at Washington State aside, there are people who feel that he's just not going to be what we thought he could be in the first couple of starts. But are you still sold on Minshew? I think he needs to learn a little bit more of the NFL game, but I still like what he can bring, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Don Marrone, the head coach down in Jacksonville, is sold on him, Charlton, because he benched Nick Foles and put Minshew back in the lineup. When you look at Nick Foles, they gave him, $27 million guaranteed this year, and he's riding the pine.
You ride the pine for $27 million, Big C. I think a lot of people would ride the pine for $27 million. It's amazing throwing around numbers like $27 million, and you don't even go to work. I mean, he can go and sit on the bench, Big C. But Josh Allen, Buffalo Bills, this kid's out of Fireball, California, in the Central Valley. I guess one of the Cantaloupe regions of California. 368 attempts, 225 completions. Allen's thrown for 2,591 yards, 16 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. But I think he looks better because their defense is legit, and he's not afraid to take a hit. He'll actually lower the shoulder and fight for an extra yard. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Josh Allen has really evolved in his second year in the NFL, Charlton. He's one of those quarterbacks who doesn't hesitate in utilizing his own body, taking off, running down the field. He's become more poised in the pocket. He's taken command of this Buffalo offense. The team trusts him, and he is growing expeditiously, and the Bills will make the playoffs for the first time in over a decade.
Isn't that something? They may have a chance to even tie their division. Say it ain't so. And speaking of that, the great Tom Brady, 486 attempts, 297 completions, Big C, 3,268 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Now, Josh Allen and Brady in that same AFC East. Brady grew up in San Mateo, California, went to Sarah High School, about 100 miles away from where Josh Allen grew up in Fireball. But they're two California kids, and isn't it amazing? Two California natives may be competing in the AFC East for who wins, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Tom Brady is a resident in the AFC East, Charlton, as far as winning the division. They've been pushed this year by Buffalo, but I still think New England has a little bit more.
When he's up in age, he's in his 40s now, and he wants to play until he's 45, I believe. That's what he said. And people say, well, Brady's a little bit not what he used to be. Brady's thrown the ball as much as anybody. In fact, when you look at the top guys in the AFC quarterbacks, he's thrown the ball more than anybody, yet there's this thought that he doesn't have good receivers. If that's the case, why is he throwing the ball more than anybody? Your thoughts, Big C?
Well, he has good receivers. These are NFL caliber receivers, Charlton. Otherwise, they would not be on the roster. Are they the all-stars that you see on other teams? No, they're not. But salary cap implications create situations for all different teams. And the system that New England runs, these guys work well in it. They're 10-2, so they can't be that bad.
Can't be that bad. And when you throw the ball 486 times, and you think about that, the guy in Lamar Jackson's thrown 322 times. So he's over 140 more pass attempts, actually about 162 more pass attempts than Jackson. Just amazing when you think about how old he is compared to NFL age. Rivers for the LA Chargers. I don't know if he'll get another season playing in Los Angeles. Just seems like he's lost something. Can't really tell what it is. But he's thrown the ball 445 times, 288 completions, 3,434 yards, 17 touchdowns. But he has 15 interceptions. He either needs LASIK surgery or he's lost a lot of spin on his pass. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the interceptions are really hurting the Chargers. They've been a turnover-prone team. It didn't help that Melvin Gordon was out the first quarter of the season. Charlton, in a contract dispute, came back. Took him a while to get in rhythm, but the Chargers, when you look at where they are, Charlton, it's come down to some late plays in the fourth quarter that have cost them a multitude of games.
Yeah, it does count against you. I want to jump on the receivers, and you look at Hopkins for Houston, and I think about how dominant this guy is. He has 903 yards on 86 catches. He averages 10.5 yards a catch. His longest pass is 38 yards, and he has 6 touchdowns, Big C. And there are some people who say he's a must guy that you got to find him when you need a catch for a reception. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Deshaun Watson does not utilize him enough, Charlton. He's one of the elite receivers in the NFL. He's in the top 3 as far as ability in this league. He needs a few more tries during the game.
He does need a few more tries. Edelman New England Patriots, 82 catches, 915 yards, 11.2 average. His longest 44. He has 5 touchdowns. If you were to ask anyone in the league, they would say Hopkins is a better player than Edelman. He's bigger, he's stronger, and faster. But Edelman has fewer catches. He has more yards, a bigger average, and his longest pass catch is 44 yards. Hopkins 38. He has 1 touchdown fewer. But perception-wise, that doesn't make any sense, but it does, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it's the 2 different systems, Charlton. When you look at New England's passing system, they pass the run.
Yeah.
Those wide swing passes that Edelman are always catching in the quick slants allows him more opportunities than what Hopkins. He's a true wide out, and so he's only going to play on the outside. He's not coming over the middle.
He's not coming over the middle. And then when you look at Keenan Allen for the L.A. Chargers, he has hauled in 864 yards, averaging 11.4 yards a catch. His longest reception is 36 yards, and he has 5 touchdowns. When guys can average 10 yards a catch, and that's just an average, you would think don't run any pass plays less than 10 yards and just keep throwing the ball more, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Keenan Allen's been always one of the top receivers in the AFC, Charlton. This young man has been an all-pro. Phillip Rivers has struggled this year, but Keenan Allen's been one of the consistents in offense.
Very consistent. Eckler, L.A. Chargers also, same thing, 69 receptions, 718 yards, 10.4 average, 55 yards is his longest reception, Big C, and he has 7 touchdowns for the L.A. Chargers. He's really putting up good numbers.
Well, he got a chance to start this season because Melvin Gordon held out. So those are excellent numbers from a running back coming out of the backfield.
Out of the backfield, Travis Kelce, Kansas City Chiefs as a tight end. I've always liked his swagger. I think he's not Andy Gonzalez, but he's pretty close to it. 68 catches, 923 yards, 13.6 yards per reception. Longest reception, 47 yards, but he only has 4 touchdowns. Get him the ball more in the red zone, my opinion. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, he was without Patrick Mahomes for 2.5 games, Charlton, so his numbers took a dip. But when you talk about elite tight end in the NFL, it's Travis Kelce. And this weekend, he most likely will set an all-time record for NFL tight ends, having 5 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons.
That's absolutely amazing. Kellen Winslow, we think about Gonzalez players, Gronkowski. Everybody wants a good tight end. Brent Jones from back in the day with the San Francisco 49ers. You look at Boyd for Cincinnati. On a bad team with a win, so I know they're partying like it's 99, Big C. 68 receptions, 758 yards, 11.1 yards per catch. 47 yards is his longest catch, but he only has 3 touchdowns. And you like that playing for the Bengals this year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they've had a quarterback with the Bengals. Tyler Boyd was a 1,000-yard receiver last year, Charlton. He's an outstanding young prop, more targets during a game.
He has to have more targets. And I want to just get a few more. And I'm really disappointed in what the Oakland Raiders have done this year, especially when this is the last year in Oakland. And I know people say you're playing for your team and you're playing for the fans and all that jazz. Waller for Oakland, 66 catches, 107 yards, nothing too shabby. He averages 12.2 yards per catch. That's amazing for a team that can't win. 48 yards is his longest reception. He only has 3 touchdowns. Something doesn't seem right when you average 12 yards a catch, but you only get 3 touchdowns. Throw the ball more in the red zone, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a guy they brought in off the scrap heap, Charlton. He's had an outstanding year. This is just status quo for the Raiders. That offense is up and down like a yo-yo.
You like like a yo-yo, Big C. Cleveland, Landry, you think about him. 65 receptions, 919 yards, 14.1 yards per catch. 65 yards is his long, so you know he can run. 5 touchdowns. But it seems like it doesn't matter because Cleveland's going to struggle no matter what, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Jarvis Landry has always been a tremendous receiver since coming out of LSU. Even when he was with the Miami Dolphins, it was odd that they sent him off to Cleveland, Charlton, but he's a consistent inside receiver. He's going to get those hard yards every time you throw him the ball.
Would you believe Leonard Fournette, Jacksonville Jaguars, when you talk about one of their top receivers, 65, Big C, 65 catches, you need this guy running the ball. But I know if you can catch the ball, you got to have that, like Roger Craig back in the day for the 49ers. 65 catches, only 444 yards, averaging 6.8 yards per catch. But he's doing it out of the backfield. He has as long as his 27 yards. But he hasn't scored a touchdown as a receiver, and that surprises me in Jacksonville, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is a guy who's a consistent workhorse, Charlton. He's going to go over the 1,000-yard mark in rushing this weekend. in the Jacksonville Jaguars game, but you know you have a safety net with him swinging out of the backfield.
You got to have him. I remember how dominant he was in the playoffs up in New England a couple of moons ago, but they end up giving up a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. I guess they were tripping some people also up in New England. And then we'll finish off with Brown with Buffalo, 61 receptions, 882 yards, 14.5 yards per reception. That leads the list that we covered. His longest catch and run is 40 yards, and he has 5 touchdowns. And people wonder how is Josh Allen looking pretty good. I hear throwing a football and a cantaloupe, they're pretty much the same spin, Big C.
Well, the weight of the football is a little more equal, Charlton. You know what it's going to weigh every time versus that cantaloupe.
Yeah, that's true. Cantaloupes are juicy. Football's not quite as juicy. And we'll finish up on some of the rushers before we come back to the Big C timeout. And you got to run the ball to win. And the guy that you always talk about, it's amazing that Cleveland doesn't have a winning record. Nick Chubb for Cleveland, he's carried the rock 238 times, 1,175 yards, averaging 5 yards a carry. His longest run is 88 yards. He has 7 touchdowns, and they don't recognize that on the Browns. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the Browns would be a better team if he carried the ball more, Charlton. He's the most complete back in the NFL right now.
He really is. You look at Henry for Tennessee, 232 attempts, 1,140 yards, also averaging 5 yards a pop. Longest run, 74 yards. He's got 11 touchdowns, so they're really feeding Henry. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's kind of unfair when he gets out in open field, Charlton. It shouldn't be fair that a defensive lineman can run that fast out of the backfield. But, you know, he's a horse, and nobody wants to go out there and tackle him.
No, I wouldn't want to hit a guy that's running that fast and that big. And then you look at Fournette out of Jacksonville. Talked about him as a receiver. 220 attempts, 989 yards. Good old boys averaging 5 yards a pop. I'll say 4.5, but I'll round up to 5. Has 81 yards as his longest. But he only has 3 touchdowns. That means he's not getting the ball enough in the red zone, my opinion, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they haven't spent enough time in the red zone this year as a team. When you look at Jacksonville's record, it's indicative of not scoring enough points.
They got to get in the red zone to run the ball more in the red zone. I like that take. And then Jackson, Baltimore Ravens, 220 carries. I mean, is it a carry or is it a keep when he has the ball? 989 yards. He's going to crack 1,000 yards this weekend. And it's just amazing to see that as a quarterback. We're talking about guys that run the ball that barely have more than him. He's averaging 4.5 yards a carry, and he usually lines up about 5 yards behind the center. So just like running backs, I mean, I'm really impressed with that. 81 yards is his longest run. He has 3 touchdowns. When have you noticed a quarterback that can run for 81 yards on the long run in the NFL? Normally you get pulled down after about 20 yards, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Jonathan, I've seen that happen on several occasions with quarterbacks been able to take the distance. You know, people don't remember Bobby Douglas, who used to play with the Bears. He set the record initially for yards for a quarterback in the regular season at 975 prior to it being broken by Michael Vick, which we've seen him have several runs throughout his career, 70, 80-yard range. With Lamar Jackson has been something special this year. He's been a treat for the entire league.
He really is a treat for the entire league, Big C. And then a couple of more guys. You look at Mack for Indianapolis, and 192 carries, 862 yards, 4.5 yards a carry, 63 yards is his longest, and he has 4 touchdowns on the season. But you think like he has so much more potential, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Marlon Mack has missed the past couple of games with a broken hand, Charlton, so I don't know if he's going to be back before the season ends, and if the Indianapolis coach would have to make the playoffs for him to come back.
And I want to make a correction. And when I was talking about Jackson for Baltimore, he's actually carried the ball only 140 times. He has 977 yards. He's averaging 7 yards per attempt. 7 per attempt. His longest run is 47 yards. He has 7 touchdowns. And I misspoken. It was Fournette for Jacksonville that ran 220 times for 989 yards, 4.5 average, 81 yards is his longer, 3 touchdowns. So going back to Jackson, have you ever known a running back, and he's a quarterback, have you ever known a running back in any era to average 7 yards a pop, and you know he's going to run it? Your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I don't think you remember Eric Dickerson from early in his career. Eric Dickerson was a threat every time he touched the football to take it the distance. I mean, he had some games with astonishing numbers.
Yeah, it's amazing. We could go on and on down the line. But I just love seeing players that are doing their thing, helping their teams win. Before we get into the Big C timeout, I'll finish with one more, and that's Ingram for Baltimore. 166 attempts, 837 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, 53 yards is his longest, and he scored 9 touchdowns. And this is a player that complements Jackson so much, and I think they're just a tough out. It's going to be amazing to see how well they play against Buffalo coming up. It's almost like playoffs have already started. Your thoughts on Ingram, Big C?
Well, he's picked up where he left off in New Orleans, Charlton. Former Heisman Trophy winner out of University of Alabama. Has done a miraculous job in his first year in Baltimore.
Yeah, I really appreciate watching good football. We're going to take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about some things that are happening in the world of college football. We're going to actually give some coaches some grades, Big C, and hopefully they'll pass the test. You can pass it too. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. The apps that I really love are Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You're here, welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the growth we're having with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast Network. That's on television, launching on Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. So really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. I want to give out a grade. When you go to school, how do you know you did a good job? Well, they give you a grade. And if you get an F, that's not good. You might have to retake the class. If you get an A, that's excellent. You might make the honors list. So college football, first-year coaches, the grades. This is Big C University. Big C, you should start a university. Big C University. And I'm going to go to the #1 coach, Ohio State's Ryan Day. I would say he aces the test with an A right now, but they win the Big Ten over Wisconsin. You got to give them an A+, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, here's Ryan Day in his first 10 years as head coach. He's actually 15-0 because he coached 3 games last year when Urban Meyer was suspended.
Yeah.
And now he has the #1 undefeated team in the country.
#1 and undefeated. A player that I like, and then he was on the staff with Nick Saban, a hard-nosed guy that I really feel if they just buy into his style of thinking and coaching, he's always very demonstrative on the sideline. He puts his heart into it. Reminds me of Lou Holtz. Colorado, Mel Tucker. He's 5 wins, 7 losses this year. Now, he could not lead the Buffaloes to a winning record this year, despite having quarterback Steve Montez. And I want to get your thoughts on what you give him. I know you got to give players and coaches time to build up, but he came in and told people, look, you got a couple of weeks to prove if you're going to be on the team. He was just honest, and I think it's going to pay off if they give him enough time, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you look at these coaches that have coming off the Nick Saban tree, as they say, there really hasn't been a lot of success following behind him other than Kirby Smart. These coaches have struggled, Charlton. And coming into a program, normally when you get a job as a new coach, the program has been down.
Yeah.
So it takes some time to rebuild.
Oh, yeah. It takes time to rebuild. And speaking of rebuilding, as we go south, you got to look at Georgia Tech, Jeff Collins. It takes a lot of moxie. They're 3-9, and they get the grade on the curve because he's a transitioning coach, transitioned from that triple option that was always difficult to guard against as a defensive player. But the win over the lowly Miami Hurricanes, which I would never think he would say that about Miami, it has to be a better grade for him, even with a bad record. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about what Jeff Collins had to inherit down at Georgia Tech, Charlton, after Paul Johnson retired, he inherited an undersized, untalented post-out team, Charlton, that ran the triple option.
Yeah.
Those players transitioning were out of place, and so he's going to take a couple of years, bring in players that fit the pro-style system. They struggle a little bit with 3-9 record, Charlton, but expect big things in the next 2 years at Georgia Tech.
Yeah, you want, but they're still in the state of Georgia. They're always going to be backdoor to the Georgia Bulldogs, in my opinion. Kansas, again, he got to get bigger paperbacks to get better players. Les Miles, he's 3-9. Think about this: 3 wins at Kansas, including that dismantling of Boston College is nice, but Miles hasn't proven that he can dig this team, the Jayhawks, out of a hole. And obviously, when you're at LSU and then you get a job at Kansas, the talent is a lot different. And that's when you show if you can earn your paycheck. He needs more time. But what would you grade the great coach at Kansas now, Les Miles? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to give Les Miles a C out there on the plains of Kansas, Charlton. He had a couple of real close nail-biters. Texas beat him in a last-second field goal. He lost another Big 12 game on a last-second field goal. I believe it was to Baylor, Charlton. But when I look at what Les Miles can do, he's a great motivator as a coach.
Yeah.
Kansas is one of those programs that's been in the doldrums forever. If Les Miles can get them to a 6 or 7 win season in the next 2 years, he will be a god out there on the plains of Kansas.
Well, how do you go? If you look at a lot of our Midwest programs, they're not winning. Nebraska used to be under the great Tom Osborne. They were winning games, and they even won. They were still competitive. But the last several years, they have not been competitive. Kansas never has really been competitive. I look at Missouri. They've had some success playing in the SEC Conference Big C. But also, if you think about that region of the country, it's just hard to get players to go to. So I'll bring your thoughts to this. Kansas State coach Chris Kilman, 8-4 is hard to replace a legend, but Kilman picked up right where Bill Snyder left off. And Bill Snyder, obviously one of the mavericks of college football coaching, and people would come to Kansas State just because they knew his pedigree, Big C. But how would you grade on Kilman on his job at Kansas State? Your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to give Kilman an A-. You can think about Kilman. He came from North Dakota State, where he had won 6 the subdivision championships, Charlton, and he stepped into the Power 5 conference at Kansas State and really made an impact. He knocked off a top 5 team in Oklahoma, Charlton, one of the best victories for Kansas State this past season. He has them in a bowl game. So you got to give him an A-, Charlton, coming in from the subdivision, moving up to a Power 5, and finishing high in the conference ranking.
And then when you're recruiting, a lot of coaches, they'll start recruiting. It really goes on year-round. They start scouting and looking, but they can't get players to sign until a certain time of the year according to NCAA rules. But so you would think with the success of Lamar Jackson now in the NFL and all the talk of how sports is in the South, Louisville, Scott Satterfield, 7-5. This program, it was in shambles after Bobby Petrino left, and Satterfield made it a competitive league, a competitive team again. And that's a minor miracle because we've seen what this program can do. Being in the ACC, there's not a lot of teams really overcome. Clemson's always going to be top dog. But I want to get your thoughts on how you would assess so far, Big C.
Well, Satterfield, I'm going to give him an A- also, Charlton, because when you look at what he has to compete in the ACC and how the coverage was left bare when Bobby Petrino left the program that was, on probation. He came in, Charlton, he was able to get some top 5 recruits and a 7-win season. Every game, Charlton, high praise for Satterfield.
Pretty praise for Satterfield. I want to take you, I want to keep you on the East Coast, but I want to go to the Northeast. And you would think that the Northeast with the state of New York population, New York City is a huge, but then the state is not very populous. And you would think there would be more football power. There's a lot of good high school programs. But in the Maryland, they're all recruiting from the same feeding grounds. Maryland coach Mike Osley, 3-9 so far, but things start with a bang, and the fireworks, they flamed out fast. Think about it. Loxley had a lot of work to do, but they had put up so many points in the first couple of games. I thought they would at least be a 500 team, Big C, but they've come back down to who they were, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, 3 weeks into the season, Charlton, they were leading college football in scoring. By the end of the season, they only had 3 wins. So Mike Loxley's going to get a D on his grade, Charlton, because he was not able to keep up that level of momentum that he started out the season with his team. Seemed like he lost them shortly after the season began, Charlton. They were living on their laurels and reading the paper. You have to be more motivational as a coach. Mike Loxley will learn from this first year of doldrums, Charlton, after leaving the University of Georgia.
When you think about a coach, and coaches always want to go to a hotbed of talent, and you always say, when I ask you, what's it going to take to get college football, I think, more relevant again on West Coast? I think it's exposure. There's as good of athletes in California as anywhere in the country, but when people leave the state, it can leave your cabinets a little bit bare. Same thing in Florida. So how do we explain Manny Diaz, University of Miami, the U, with all their great players, Michael Irvin's played there. So many players have played there that are just dominant. And you think about how their legacy, Ray Lewis, I mean, it goes on and on and on. But 6-6, I remember when they started the season against Florida, and it was a great game in my opinion, but it was marred by a lot of turnovers, but you could see the talent. But if you're Miami, you cannot lose to Florida International University. That's transitioning like Georgia Tech, but they're not at Miami's level. But Miami played like they were playing in a practice game. Just my opinion, your thoughts on the grade.
Well, when I look at Manny Diaz, I'm going to give him an F at Miami, and I'm also going to give him an F at Temple. He lasted at Temple about a week. He took the job at Temple. The job came up at Miami. He deserted Temple and went to Miami. So what he got was what he deserved, Charlton, a 6-6 season. He wasn't the motivator because he came in there, and I don't even know if his heart was in it as a coach more than his pocket when I look at that, Charlton. He said it was his dream job when he grew up, but your dream job is what you do in reality.
Yeah.
You don't sit up and just think about it, Charlton. And so Miami is a team just like USC that used to be good, now they want to be good.
Well, let me get your thoughts then, because when you look at marquee programs, anywhere in the college football universe, University of Southern California, they keep it Helton. That's a good and a bad thing. I mean, he is who he is. They got to have a way to keep players. Same with Miami. It can't be facilities. Miami plays in an NFL stadium, so no one can say they don't have the facilities. NFL plays there.
Well, but you said they play in an NFL stadium. You know how far Fort Lauderdale is from Carl's Gable?
Yeah, it's a long drive.
That's a 40-minute car ride. So when you're talking about getting a student body to the stadium, Charlton, everybody in college can have transportation.
Yeah.
When you have on-campus facilities, you look at USC, you look at Miami, they don't have on-campus facilities. That is the difference between the big boys now and what the big boys used to be. When they played downtown in the Orange Bowl, Charlton, that was close to the campus.
Yeah.
All the students would show up for the game. Just like with USC. When they were winning, there was a reason to go to the Coliseum. But now that they're not winning, kids, have too many other things to do. You got to look at social media and all the other access the kids have.
Yeah.
So when you got an on-campus stadium and you're on television all the time and you're winning, that's what brings the recruits to you. It's not the name of the school.
Yeah.
It's the tradition of winning. And when you're winning now and you're on national television, prime time, there's not a high school kid out there saying, well, I want to stay in this area because they don't have games on prime time nationally.
Yeah, and that's amazing. That thought that you put out there, going up to Fort Lauderdale, if people know the area. When they were at Miami, they played in the antiquated Orange Bowl that I loved. I thought it was a great stadium. And that's when they had a 58-game winning streak that was snapped by Washington back in '94. But you're right, that there was something about the energy they had at a downtown stadium, too, close to the campus. North Carolina, Mack Brown, he won a championship for Texas over USC with the great help of Vince Young. They're 6-6. You could say 7-6 if they had a field camera to show how they beat Clemson, but obviously it's all fair and love and war. But he picked up a broken program, and to get them in bowl contention now, he has a true freshman quarterback in Max Hallowell, a star that'll work. I like what Mack Brown did at Texas, and I like what he's doing in North Carolina. How would you grade the great Mack Brown, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, after sitting for a half a decade in the broadcast booth, I'm going to give Mack Brown a B. It is great. He had a couple close games, Charlton. He's gotten back into his mantra of coaching. He went back to where he got his start at North Carolina. The team bought into his philosophy, Charlton, and these players played well.
Yeah.
You think about developing a true freshman quarterback, the future is bright at North Carolina. Might not be as bright as at Clemson Orange, but it's bright.
And they may not have the better eyeglasses that they use at the Clemson games, too, just my opinion. Texas Tech coach Matt Wells, they're 4-8 this year. He came to town with a proven track record, but posted a worse record than Kingsbury. And, I mean, think about this. Texas, just like California, just like Florida, you would think every program would be successful. I told you in the past decade, actually 2 decades, California's lost about 10 college football programs. So that, I mean, there's been so many of them. I can't name them all, but UOP, Chico State, Humboldt State, Sonoma State. There was Long Beach State, Cal State Fullerton, Santa Clara, Cal State Hayward, University of San Francisco. I mean, there's a couple of more that I might not be having on the top of my mind right now. But even Texas, I don't hear about them losing programs, but there's a lot of losing teams in Texas for such a big football state. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, everybody can't win in Texas, Charlton, and they all play each other. When you think about the number of Power 5 conference schools that are in the state of Texas, you talk about Texas Tech, TCU, Texas, Baylor, Texas A&M, Charlton. These are major college football programs that are in SMU, even though they're not a Power 5, they're right there in Dallas.
Yeah.
So when you think about the number of talented players, Charlton, that have to be spread around to the state, Texas San Antonio, another one of those schools, UTEP, who can't win a game down there, Charlton. So there's a multitude of colleges. And when you think about Texas Tech, they let Cliff Kingsbury go last year, hoping that the new coach would come in. Matt Wells wasn't able to get the job done, Charlton. When you think about Matt Wells, I'm going to give him a D+. Because here's a guy that came in with all the talent on the board. This is a great passing program down at Texas Tech, and he just failed.
Yeah, well, he didn't pass a test so far. We'll see. West Virginia, Neil Brown, 5-7 on the season. Brown didn't have a lot of work to do, but the program took a pretty significant step back. This team should have been able to stumble its way into a bowl game. I remember they beat Texas last year, better quarterback in hand. It was almost the last minute they threw a touchdown pass down at Texas and won. But this West Virginia, I don't know why they're even in the Big 12. You would think they're more ACC territory, but give me the grade you have on Coach Brown, your thoughts.
Well, Charlton, they didn't have Will Greer when he showed up, so I'm going to give him a C-.
Yeah.
You know, Dana Holgorsen left in the middle of the night, took the job down at Houston, and so it was a rush job to get a coach in, to bring in a new philosophy, a new mindset, Charlton. After you had a huge graduating class, he just wasn't able to motivate the underclassmen that he had left over.
Yeah, so graduating Big C's top of the class for college football coaches is Coach Ryan Day, Ohio State. And they have everything that the Buckeyes want, whether you put them 1 or 2, depending on who's going to vote them in. They got to win the Big Ten. I think they will. They'll handle Wisconsin, and then they'll get into the bowl series, and who they play will just be determined probably by what happens in Santa Clara between Oregon and Utah. So I give it 12-0 Ryan Day, aced his test, at least going into the championship game, and I really look forward to seeing what Ohio State would do in the bowl championship series. So will any of the Power 5 games be close? I want to get your thoughts, because people say Oregon have to have a blowout win or Utah have to have a blowout win. They've been saying that all year long. Well, now they've actually met. They were the favorites to play in the Pac-12 championship when the season began, and now they're here. So when you think about that, I want to get your thoughts. Number 23, Virginia, they're 9-3 versus number 3, Clemson. That's 12-0. The point spread is 28.5. Will they cover? And if so, make Clemson an independent. Make sure your thoughts.
Well, as you look at Clemson right now, Charlton, they've been a juggernaut the last 6 games. I mean, the offense started out slowly. Everybody was asking what was wrong with Trevor Lawrence. But the last 6 weeks, Charlton, Trevor Lawrence is the Trevor Lawrence from his freshman year. He has been lights out. He's been finding wide-open receivers. Running back Travis Etienne, who has set a Clemson all-time touchdown record for rushing touchdowns, Charlton. Their defense right now is as good as the defense that they had last year that lost 4 first-rounders to the NFL draft. Clemson is a load.
Yeah, they're very talented, Big C. Number 1, Ohio State, 12-0 versus number 8, Wisconsin, 10-2. That point spread is 16. And I think the point spread in the Penn State game was about 18, and Ohio State didn't cover. It's hard to beat Wisconsin twice by 2 touchdowns. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't beat them by 3 touchdowns, just because this coach, and you gave him an A for his grade, and I think Day has earned that. They don't take their foot off the throttle, and the fact that Penn State almost played them close, that's as close as anyone's come. Ohio State, I think they cover that spread. Your thoughts?
Well, I could only give Ryan Day an A+. If there was another grade higher, I would have given him a grade higher than an A+.
Yeah.
When I think about what he has done as a head coach, going 15-0 at the helm of the Buckeyes over the last season and an abbreviated season last year, Charlton, how he's been able to motivate his players. And the players now at Ohio State understand the task at hand. They were left outside of the college football playoffs the last 2 years, Charlton. They don't want to be in that position again. This is a team on a mission. They've had a perfect season, and they don't want to scar it up right now. they're going to dominate Wisconsin. It's
yeah.
indoors, Charlton. They won't have the cold weather like they had at the Horseshoe last week against Penn State.
That's very well said. So I want to get your thoughts on the West Coast again. Utah is 11-1. They play number 13 Oregon. That's 10-2. The point spread is 6.5. So it's a possession game when you got a 6.5. Both teams have to travel. The weather's supposed to be a little bit mucky later in the evening on the West Coast. It's a grass surface at Levi Stadium. And, Herbert, I'm not impressed with him in a big game. You said this when the season began. I said, no, Big C, you're wrong. This guy can play. But in big games, he gets a lot of credit when they win. And they'll say, well, the defense didn't hold up when they lose. But I like the moxie that Utah has. I think their defense is better than Oregon's. Their offense, I don't know if it's as good, but I think they're good enough to win. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about all the conference championship games, Charlton, all the teams have to travel. This will be one of those stadiums, Charlton, that's going to have a meek crowd in it. And I think that will weigh a lot on the players when they sit up and look at this cavernous stadium that's not a sellout, that their fans didn't follow them down to this Levi Stadium in San Francisco to watch this conference championship game, Charlton. But when you look at the point differential in this game versus all the other conference championship games, a single-digit point spread, Charlton, that lets you know that they're not putting much credence on either one of these teams as far as getting into the college football playoff.
Are scoring a lot of points because they keep saying you got to win big. But on the flip side of that, if you win by double digits, a touchdown and a field goal, if they outperform the point spread, the guys in Vegas, then maybe that means something too. But it's hard to score a lot of points when it's raining. Number 7 Baylor, they're 11-1 versus number 6 Oklahoma, 11-1. The point spread is 9. I think for the optics test, I think college football loves Oklahoma. They're not into who played fair and who won the game fair. It's about money. And Oklahoma has a pedigree that's been there. I remember seeing them in many, many Orange Bowls under the great Barry Switzer back in the day down in Florida. And they always sell out. They always have a large contingent of people that follow. They came out to the Rose Bowl a couple of times. They beat Washington State one year. And the last time they were in the Rose Bowl, they actually lost to Georgia. But they always travel. They always travel, and people spend money. That's why, in my opinion, I love the Pac-12. But if Oklahoma wins, I think they'll leapfrog Utah. Just my opinion, your thoughts?
I think hands down that they will leapfrog Utah, Charlton, because this is basically a home game when you look at Texas, where this game is going to be played at AT&T Stadium. Baylor's right there in Waco. We always see Oklahoma come in for the Red River Shootout against the University of Texas in the Cotton Bowl, Charlton. They will bring 50,000 people down from Norman for this game. It's going to be an electric atmosphere. Baylor, this is a program that has come back from the ashes from Briles' days when he was down there and they had all the scandals, Charlton. When I look at where they've got to now, Lincoln Riley, one of the hottest offensive commodities, Jalen Hurts, wouldn't it be special to see him come and make it to the college football playoffs after being there 4 years ago as a starting quarterback?
Taking 2 different programs, that would be amazing. And I think that was more of a story than a Utah or Oregon. And I hate saying that, but I'm just a realist. I hope I'm wrong. Number 4, Georgia, 11-1, versus number 2, LSU, 12-0. The point spread is 7. The Oregon and Utah point spread is like 6.5. So there's not a lot of spread in this point spread, but I see anyone staying close to LSU if they can't score 40 points. Can Georgia get to 40? Because if they can probably win. But if they can't get to if they're scoring 35, it'll be another game where, hey, LSU won again by a touchdown. Do you think Georgia can put 40 on LSU's defense and hold their offense under 40, Big C? Your thoughts?
I think that point spread is fool's gold, Charlton, for trying to get some money laid on Georgia in this game. I don't see this game being closer than a 17-point game.
Yeah.
Georgia's had a sluggish offense all year long, Charlton. They've had games where they've been in a low. They just haven't been scoring points. Even last week against Georgia Tech, a team who's only won 3 games on the season.
Yeah.
Yes, we saw the final score, but that first quarter and a half, Charlton, was a real struggle for the Bulldogs offense, and they're going to be without their top receiver in this game. We know that Joe Burrow is the front runner for the Heisman.
Yeah.
He wins the SEC championship, Charlton. He has a guaranteed trip in that seat to New York City, Charlton, in a week to pick up the hardware. But this LSU team, Ed Ogeron, I love Ed's voice. I love his mantra. USC decided they didn't want to have him as a head coach years ago, Charlton. He went to LSU, and the Tigers have been strong ever since he showed up.
And I've always thought that a Tiger was, there's something about the energy. I remember USC went down there in the South and played a couple of times. I mean, that's way many moons ago, and they talked about the energy of some of the Southern crowds. But I want to just cover up on, before we get into the closeout of our show today, the playoffs are already here in the Division II playoffs. And you have Notre Dame, Ohio, 12-1 at Slippery Rock. They're 12-0. West Florida's 10-2 at Lenoir-Rhyne. They're 13-0. And you have teams like Northwest Missouri State, 12-1 at Ferris State. That's 11-0. Texas A&M Commerce, 11-2 at Minnesota State at 12-0. And you get into many of these programs, Division III, they have the Division B programs, but the NCAA, the FCS playoffs start Saturday. You have Monument out of New Jersey. They're 11-2 at James Madison, 11-1. Northern Iowa, 9-4 at South Dakota State, 8-4. Kennesaw State, 11-2 at Weber State, 9-3. You have Albany, New York, 9-4 at Montana State, 9-3. And then there's a lot of other programs. The point being, Elston P, 10-3 at Sacramento State, 9-3. And one of the teams that's always winning, you have Nicholas State, 9-4. Actually, Nicholas 9-4 at North Dakota State, 12-0. They have 24 teams in this bracket for the FCS playoffs. And I love it. I know there's always this talk about how you get teams to do it. It's too hard to travel. You got to lose games. But it was the smaller division schools. I think Chris Alt from Nevada in 78 started the playoffs in 1AA. And they've gotten it right, just my opinion. I know we'll say we're going to lose out a lot of the bowl games and all the money. But they can make some of those bowl games money, just like the smaller divisions do. I know it may be fool's gold, but I like when you have 24 teams that can compete for something. Big C, your thoughts?
But who's going to sponsor those, Charlton? The reason why you have the bowl games is because you have time to promote the bowl games. And so all these huge corporate sponsors who put hundreds of millions of dollars out there every year for sponsorship, TV advertising, the hype, the build up to the game, Charlton, you would lose all of that. And to put in more teams and not have the revenue, the NCAA is not going to turn its back on revenue to satisfy another 8 teams, Charlton, getting into the college football playoffs. It's not feasible. College football and all sports are about economics. It's not about the number of teams that you play. You put all those teams together you just talked about in that subdivision playoff. It doesn't earn as much money, Charlton, as the Rose Bowl does. When you think about the Rose Bowl being sponsored, you think about the college football playoffs being sponsored by Chick-fil-A. You think about, all the big bowl games, the Capital One Orange Bowl, the Belk Bowl, Charlton, the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, AutoZone Liberty Bowl. When you think about these games, the Valero Alamo Bowl. So as you talk about these major corporate sponsors, where are they going to go? We say, we're only going to have a week to talk about your game, and we're going to move someplace around the country that we don't know that we can get people to. That's the reason why these bowls are held in these cavernous stadiums, that you can bring in 70 to 100,000 people because you've had time to promote it and get the people there. On those games, Charlton, that you just mentioned, I can guarantee you that none of those games will have more than 30,000 people in the stadiums, and that's going to make you any money.
That's a very good point. They follow the money, not who's going to win a game. That's very important. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. The apps I really love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the growth of Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Also appreciate the acclaim with iHeartRadio, Big C Sports Podcast, one of the top podcasts in the top 1% of all of their podcasts on that network. Really appreciate that. Big C tonight will close out NBA style, Philadelphia at Washington. Denver is at New York. Houston's at Toronto. So they're at the defending NBA champion Toronto Raptors. And Phoenix is at New Orleans. Will James Harden shoot the ball high enough to hit the CNN tower in Toronto? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, he missed the dunk that he made, even though it went through the basket. They did not allow it. So who knows what's going to occur up in Sky High City?
Yeah, you never know, but it's going to be fun just watching those teams battle. And I love the sports world. Tonight, big game in Chicago. I mean, who's going to win? Chicago or the Dallas Cowboys? We will find out, Big C. Back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in Sports Universe?
Well, Charlton, I've gone to the rodeo a few times, and I watched the Cowboys riding the bull. And I wonder how would a cowboy fare riding a bear in the rodeo.
Oh, well, you can find out. You know them good old boys from Texas. They would skin that bear, and you can ride that bear, too, every Monday through Friday at 5 to 6 p.m. worldwide. When you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. As we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.